The Akitu Festival Part 3. Tiamat and Merodach advanced to combat against one another. They made ready for battle. The Lord of the High Gods spread out the net which Anu had given him. He snared the dragon and she could not escape. Tiamat opened her mouth which was 7 miles wide, and Merodach called upon the evil wind to smite her. He caused the wind to keep her mouth agape so that she could not close it. All the tempests and the hurricanes entered in, filling her body, and her heart grew weak, she gasped, overpowered. Then the Lord of the High God seized his dart and cast it through the lower part of her body. It tore her inward parts and severed her heart. So was Tiamat slain. Merodach overturned the body of the dead dragon and stood upon it. All the evil gods who had followed her were stricken with terror and broke into flight. But they were unable to escape. Merodach caught them in his great net, and they stumbled and fell uttering cries of distress, and the whole world resounded with their wailing and lamentations. The Lord of the High Gods broke the weapons of the evil gods and put them in bondage. Then he fell upon the monsters which Tiamat had created, he subdued them, divested them of their powers, and trampled them under his feet. King he seized with the others. From this god great Merodach took the tablets of fate, and impressing upon them his own seal, placed them in his bosom. I read 21 copies from 21 translators of the Enuma Elish. Look at this one by N.K. Sandars. When Marduk had sent out the moon, he took the sun and set him to complete the cycle from this one to the next new year. He gave him the eastern gate, and the ends of the night with the day, he gave to Shamash. Then Marduk considered Tiamat. He schemed spume from the bitter sea, heaped up the clouds, spindrift of wet and wind and cooling rain, the spittle of Tiamat. With his own hands from the steaming mist he spread the clouds. He pressed hard down the head of water, heaping mountains over it, opening springs to flow. Euphrates and Tigris rose from her eyes, but he closed the nostrils and held back their spring head. He piled huge mountains on her paps and through them drove water holes to channel the deep sources, and high overhead he arched her tail, locked into the will of heaven. The pit was under his feet, between was the crotch, the sky's fulcrum. Now the earth had foundations and the sky its mantle. Now if you climb a tall mountain you will find sea fossils there. How in the world did sea fossils get that high? Well, remember the whole earth was covered by sea water and it had sea life in it, so were the enemies of the high gods overthrown by the Avenger. Angsar's commands were fulfilled and the desires of Ea fully accomplished. Merodach strengthened the bonds which he had laid upon the evil gods and then returned to Tiamat. He leapt upon the dragon's body, he clove her skull with his great club, he opened the channels of her blood which streamed forth, and caused the north to carry her blood to hidden places. The high gods, his fathers, clustered around. They raised shouts of triumph and made merry. Then they brought gifts and offerings to the great Avenger. Merodach rested a while, gazing upon the dead body of the dragon. He divided the flesh of Kupu, and devised a cunning plan. Then the Lord of the high gods split the body of the dragon like that of a meshed fish into two halves. With one half he enveloped the firmament, he fixed it there and set a watchman to prevent the waters falling down. With the other half he made the earth. Then he made the abode of Ea in the deep, and the abode of Anu in high heaven. The abode of Enlil was in the air. Merodach set all the great gods in their several stations. He also created their images, the stars of the zodiac, and fixed them all. He measured the year and divided it into months. For 12 months he made 3 stars each. After he had given starry images of the gods separate control of each day of the year, he founded the station of Nibiru, his own star, to determine the limits of all stars, so that none might err or go astray. He placed beside his own the stations of Enlil and Ea, and on each side he opened mighty gates, fixing bolts on the left and on the right. He set the zenith in the center. Merodach decreed that the moon god should rule the night and measure the days, and each month he was given a crown. Its various phases the great Lord determined, and he commanded that on the evening of its fullest brilliancy it should stand opposite the sun. He placed his bow in heaven and his net also. We have now reached the 6th tablet, which begins with a reference to words spoken to Merodach by the gods. Apparently Ea had conceived in his heart that man should be created. The Lord of the gods read his thoughts and said, I will shed my blood and fashion bone. I will create man to dwell on the earth so that the gods may be worshipped and shrines erected for them. I will change the pathways of the gods. Changing the pathway of the gods means he changed the orbit of such planets. The rest of the text is fragmentary, and many lines are missing. The goddess Aruru, a deity of Sippar, and one of the forms of the Lady of the Gods, is associated with Merodach as the creatrix of the seed of mankind. The beasts of the field and living creatures in the field he formed. Notice it says mankind, not man. He also created the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, grass, reeds, herbs, and trees, lands, marshes and swamps, cows, goats, and sea. In the 7th tablet Merodach is praised by the gods, the Agigi. As he has absorbed all their attributes, he is addressed by his 51 names, henceforth each deity is a form of Merodach. Bel-Enlil, for instance, is Merodach of lordship and domination. Sin, the moon god, is Merodach as ruler of night. Shamash is Merodach as god of law and holiness. Nergal is Merodach of war, and so on. The tendency to monotheism appears to have been most marked among the priestly theorists of Babylon. Merodach is hailed to begin with as Asari, the introducer of agriculture and horticulture, the creator of grain and plants. He also directs the decrees of Anu, Bel, and Ea, but having rescued the gods from destruction at the hands of King and Tiamat, he was greater than his fathers, the elder gods. He set the universe in order, and created all things anew. He is therefore Tutu, the Creator, a merciful and beneficent God. The following are renderings of lines 25 to 32, Tutu, Aga Azaga, the glorious crown, may he make the crowns glorious, the Lord of the glorious incantation bringing the dead to life, he who had mercy on the gods who had been overpowered, made heavy the yoke which he had laid on the gods who were his enemies, and to redeem them created mankind. The merciful one, he with whom is salvation, may his word be established, and not forgotten, in the mouth of the black-headed ones whom his hands have made. Pinch's translation. Tutu as agaazig may mankind fourthly magnify. The Lord of the pure incantation, the quickener of the dead, who had mercy upon the captive gods, who removed the yoke from upon the gods his enemies, for their forgiveness did he create mankind, the merciful one, with whom it is to bestow life. May his deeds endure, may they never be forgotten in the mouth of mankind whom his hands have made. King's translation. Tiamat, the Chaos Dragon, is the Great Mother. She has a dual character. As the origin of good, she is the creatrix of the gods. Planets, so when did all this take place? Well, for sure it was before this period. In primeval days, in distant primeval days, in primeval nights, in far-off primeval nights, in primeval years, in distant primeval years, in ancient days when everything vital had been brought into existence, in ancient days when everything vital had been nurtured, when bread had been tasted in the shrines of the land, when bread had been baked in the ovens of the land. When heaven had been moved away from earth, when earth had been separated from heaven, when the name of man had been fixed when and had carried off heaven, when Enlil had carried off earth. There is a lot of history involved here. I hope I have helped you to understand some of it.